Okay, guys, so now we're going to do the light reactions. Oh boy. Okay? So part one of this is the light reactions, and then part two is the Calvin cycle. Now, what did we say the light reactions make for the Calvin cycle? It makes ATP and NADPH. Okay, those are the two things that's responsible for making. What does it give off as a waste? Oxygen. Okay, oxygen. Remember the big picture, the oxygen kind of comes out the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to draw up here, and I don't know if you guys want to draw while I draw, or if you'd rather me draw and explain, and then give you time to write everything down. What would you prefer?
Second.
Draw and explain, and then have time to write down. Okay. So if here is, what am I drawing? Where does the light reaction happen? What part of the chloroplast? The thylakoid. Good. So here's our thylakoid. What's the inside of the thylakoid called? The lumen. And the outside of the thylakoid is the stroma. Okay, it's like a clear, watery substance where there's like protons and enzymes and stuff like that. Okay? So now, we have a couple photosystems. There's two photosystems that are involved in the light reactions of photosynthesis. Okay? A photosystem is a chlorophyll A along with pigment molecules and proteins found in the thylakoid membrane. Okay? There's an antenna complex. So what happens is you have all these little pigment molecules, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, carotenoids, etc. And their whole job is to absorb photons and energy. Okay? Photosystem 2 comes first. Okay? You would say, well, why does photosystem 2 come first? Because photosystem 1 was just discovered earlier, even though it comes second. Okay? This is also called P680. Okay? And what that means is that the wavelength of light that is best for photosystem 2 is wavelength 680. Okay? Alright, so we have this little antenna complex. Alright, now where do we get our electrons from? Water. So water splits, the sunlight splits the water, so we have our H pluses, we have our oxygen that gets given off, right? And then we have our electrons. And our electrons get passed on to this antenna complex. And then our electrons get energized by what? The sun. Okay, that's where our sun comes into play. So the sunlight shines down on our antenna complex, and it starts to energize our electrons. So our electrons bounce around from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, which one did I say was the most important? Who was I in the analogy that we talked about before?
Chlorophyll A.
Chlorophyll A. So then you have your reaction center chlorophyll A molecule. So the electrons get bounced around, and then they go to this guy, the reaction center chlorophyll A molecule, when they have enough energy. Okay? Then the electrons jump up, bless you, and they get trapped in a primary electron acceptor. Okay, and the electrons that get trapped in the primary electron acceptor are high energy. They've got lots of energy. Okay, now what happens to electrons normally? What's the next step? Do you think? Someone said it. What did you guys say? Electron transport chain. Good. So the next step for this is going through the electron transport chain. Okay, so we did this. All right, we'll talk about that later. Okay, so our first electron transport chain has three parts: plastoquinone, a cytochrome complex, which is like a bunch of them kind of together, and then plastocyanin. So here are our electrons. Okay, they get trapped up here in our primary electron acceptor. They've got lots of energy. And then here's our first electron transport chain: plastoquinone, cytochromes, and then plastocyanin. Okay, make sure you know those names. Obviously, this stuff isn't going to be on the quiz on Monday. We're going to have a quiz on like Wednesday or Thursday or something next week. You're going to have to know the names of the parts that are in the electron transport chain. Okay? So you've got plastoquinone, cytochromes, and then plastocyanin. We know already that this is more what than this?
Electronegative.
This is more what than this?
Electronegative.
So now, once the electrons get over here, do they have a lot of energy?
No.
No. So now they have to go and they get passed to the second antenna complex. Well, what's over here? What am I drawing now? Photosystem 1, also known sometimes as P700. So the best wavelength of light for this one is wavelength 700. Okay? So our electrons go down the chain, they get back over here to this antenna complex. This is another antenna complex. But they don't have any energy now, so what has to happen? Sunlight, there we go. So now our sunlight's going to re-energize our electrons. They go where?
Chlorophyll A.
Chlorophyll A, that's called the reaction center chlorophyll A molecule. Then they jump up and get trapped by what?
Electron
Another
accept.
primary electron acceptor. And then they get passed down the second electron transport chain. Okay, the second part of it, 1, 2. Ferredoxin is the first one. And then this one is called NADP plus reductase. What do you think this does? Reduces NADP plus. Good. And so it adds the electron to it, it picks up a hydrogen, and it makes our NADPH. Okay? Now, as our electrons go down this chain, they're releasing what?
Energy.
Energy. So what does that energy get harnessed to do? Pump. It powers the pumps, right? So in respiration, which way do the pumps move? Do they pump out or in?
Out.
Respiration, pumped out. Photosynthesis is the opposite. Pumps in. Okay? So the energy the proton pumps are going to pump the protons this way. So our H pluses are coming into, what's the inside called? The lumen. So our H pluses are coming into the lumen. So what do we know about the concentration of the hydrogen ions outside? It's low. And the concentration of the hydrogen ions inside is high. Okay? So what are these protons going to want to do? They're going to want to get out, diffuse out. How do they diffuse out? ATP synthase. ATP synthase does what? ADP plus
P.
phosphate turns into
ATP.
ATP. This gets powered by what? What activates this enzyme?
Proton.
The protons going through. So our protons are going through the thing. What's this process called again when you make ATP using concentration gradient ATP synthase?
Chemiosmosis.
Chemiosmosis. Okay, now, what's the other name for it in respiration? Something phosphorylation.
Oxidative.
Oxidative phosphorylation. This basically is oxidative phosphorylation, but it's called photophosphorylation. Okay, so the name of it in photosynthesis is photophosphorylation. The name for this in respiration is oxidative phosphorylation. Okay? Now, how do we remember which ones get pumped in and pumped out? Because you're having a test on 9 and 10 together. And you're going to have to compare and contrast respiration photosynthesis. So sometimes it can get confusing in your head, right? Remember ROPE. ROPE. Respiration pumped out, photosynthesis pumps in. Okay, ROPE. Respiration out, photosynthesis in. Okay, so now, is everybody okay with this so far? All right, water splits, gives us electrons. The sun energizes the electrons, the antenna complex. It jumps up, gets trapped in the final electron acceptor, goes down our first electron transport chain. The parts of it are plastiquinone, cytochromes, plastocyanin. Loses energy on the way down, as usual. Okay. The energy powers our proton pumps for pumping in from low to high. The electrons get back over here. They get re-energized by the sunlight, jumps up again to our primary electron acceptor, goes down our second chain, ferredoxin into NADP plus reductase, makes our NADPH, makes our ATP. Okay? So, the two things that we're passing on from the light reactions of the Calvin cycle are what? ATP and NADPH. Okay, and what's the other thing that's given off in the light reactions? Oxygen. Okay, oxygen comes from the water splitting. All right, now remember when we talked about NADH versus FADH2 and where they drop electrons off in the chain in respiration, and we said NADH drops them off a little bit higher because it has like more energy than those electrons? Well, the Calvin cycle needs more ATP than it needs NADPH. Okay, so we have to somehow make more ATP than NADPH through this process. All right. Now, when I say the word cyclic,